as an artist, she was a woman that had a lot of hard knocks in her life. Every time she got to a certain level, the door closed. And at one point, she ended up in England, which is the box set that just came out, was those years. And then at one point, the record deals dried up, and she was at a big label in New York, and she had the idea to record her own master. So she made her own album, packaged it on the tape, and she shopped it around. And the goal was to force a recording contract and to control it herself. And so very rare for a woman to do that, especially in the 60s and 70s. And at this label, they said to her, "We will give you $2,500 and we'll probably release it." And she said, "Well, what about a deal? What about royalties?" And they said, "No, it's just, this is what we're offering, and certainly not anything that would maintain a career." And she, from what her friend told me, said, "The hell with this," and picked up her tape and walked out of the office. She met that day the graphic designer that designed all her subsequent albums, and she formed her own label. And so she's probably the first woman in the world to have her own label, independent label, that is still 50 plus years later, still in existence.
Every once in a while you run into a remarkable story where you go, wait, could you tell me that again? I've got one for you today. So imagine a kid watching a cartoon, falling in love with a singer, a voice from a cartoon, and it completely changing his life to the point where he becomes that voice's, I don't know, angel, knight in shining armor. You'll see. It's one of those stories where you go, how and really? And what's amazing is it turned into not only a passion, but a bit of a side business that no one could have predicted. And that's why I love this story so much. So Bootstrapped Unicorns, I'm Josh Pies, and they call me around here the chief attention getter. And I'm so glad you're here for this episode. It's unique, it's different, and it's probably my favorite story I've heard in a very long time. I'm going to introduce you to my friend Jamie right now. Jamie, how are you today?
Good, how are you? It's great to be here.
I'm feeling wonderful, and I'm really glad we're on. I know we tried, more than once to get this, our schedules to line up, and here we are. So I hope I did justice teasing this episode and getting you a little prepped here. But I don't want anybody to know anything about what you do yet. I want to start right from the beginning, because you're that kid who watched a cartoon.
Right.
And we're going to get to the payoff in a big way. And jazz fans, if you are a jazz fan, like I am, this is going to go from a, what's the story about, to, oh my gosh, with a huge jazz twist.
Yeah.
This is something. So bring us back. What year did you discover this voice?
1997. I was
so in 1997. How old were you then?
15.
You're a kid. You're 15 years old. And tell me this story. So what show were you watching, and what did you experience? What did you encounter?
Somebody gave me a VHS tape, so we might have to put in the comments what that is and explain to younger people, of a video called America Rocks. And on it were all these great jazz stars singing about our country's history. And there were multiplication rocks too, where the jazz stars sang about learning your multiplication table. So there's a tiny little snippet in America Rocks where they're talking about the invention of the sewing machine. And this artist sings a fraction of a line of a song. And I was like, wow, that is an amazing voice. And it touched me to my soul. And I just said, I have to know more about this person. So this is the early days of the internet, and her name was actually misspelled all over the internet. She was an older woman at that point, but still performing and still recording. And so I said, well, I'm going to set this straight. And so I was watching the video Schoolhouse Rocks, and that was the intro to the knowledge of this person. And from there,
let me ask right now before we go there, because so we've teased her name a lot right now. But one of the things, I haven't seen this, so I'm going to go track it down. I got to see this. But with Schoolhouse Rocks, this mystical voice within my life, I've held you near. Was she a character where while you're watching it, you knew her name because they said her name, like now she's going to sing a part? Or was this, did you have to go turn into an investigator? And when you found her name, Did you even, like, first time I heard her name, I was like, that's got to be a stage name.
Right.
Like, when you found her name, what did you find?
I found, well, her name is Blossom Deary. And so I found on the internet, 1997 internet, her name was spelled Blossom Deary. Wrong all over. And so I tracked down, I thought, well, maybe she's a voice artist of some sort, or, didn't realize no jazz at the time or anything like that. And so I tracked down, and her name was actually Blossom Deary, which sounds like a stage name, but it wasn't. That was her real name. Deary is Scottish. Blossom was her first name because she had 4 older brothers, and when she was born, they kept bringing flowers into the house in the Catskill Mountains. It was springtime, and it was a joyous event. And so they brought flowers, and they kept bringing flowers, and she became Blossom. And so finding the wrong name and then finding out who she was, I decided to rectify things, because in my life, I just do. I think you said I'm not precocious, but I'm just push forward. But I said, let me make her a website. And so Blossom Deary had one of the first graphics-based websites on the internet. Not the first, but it was very young back then. And so I called clubs in New York City. I talked to people on America Online. I found out about this woman. I talked to her fans, and I built this website, and it came to her attention. I actually mailed her a letter to the club where she was performing. And I got a call in March of 1998, so I was almost 16, and it was from the Musicians Union, and they said, we've received this from Blossom. She's happy with what you've done, and keep it up. It's a work of love, we can tell, and thank you. And then before the gentleman hung up the phone, he said, maybe she'll reach out to you, but probably not. So I hung up the phone, and 30 days later, she called. And
we should say it was very nice of him to not set your hopes up. It's when he figured out you're
right.
a kid and you're a fan,
Right.
that was actually probably a kindness, because most artists would not
Right.
have the time
Right.
or interest. They just accept the blessing that you did a whole bunch of free labor for her.
Right. And it was a labor of love. It was fun. It kept me occupied, and so she kept me off the streets. So 30 days later, she called and she talked to me, and in true Blossom fashion, she was a very forward person and very forward thinking. So there were no past, there were no histories in her biography. It was all forward. And so she had corrections right away. So I rewrote parts of the website, changed images. And then she said, keep doing what you're doing. And she said, if you need to call to talk business, here's my number. So she gave me her phone number. And between March and July, I called maybe 2 times. And then I had changes to the website and just wanted to keep the connection. And so I called her in July, left a message, and she called me back. And she said, if you just want to chat, you can call me. And so that began. We used to talk probably five times a week, 5 nights a week, and about business and she was very reserved, very private, but she shared a lot of life things, things that she had experienced. I was too young to know not to ask questions that I asked. And so I would ask things. I'd say, what was so-and-so like? Or, when did you leave Paris? And, she would answer, but move on. It was very clipped, but she was very amenable to us chatting. And so I took a trip across the country in the train, and I called her from every stop. I didn't call my family. I called Blossom. So she became a really great influence in my life. And it happened rather quickly. This unknowable person and this wonderful artist
So
became.
Let's talk about unknowable for a second. So can you help the listening audience get an appreciation for how prolific she was? Because I actually had, because you and I have been talking about this, of course, I'm listening to her albums now, and I'm poking around the internet trying to figure her out a little bit. Thankfully, you've done great work with that, so it's easy. But I now have an understanding of how much I ought to be, as a jazz fan, in awe of her work. And I think she's not as household a name as she ought to be. Can you help us as an audience go, oh my? Because I think we will, if you can help us orient.
So she was gifted with a very high voice. It was a natural voice. She had a natural talent, and she also had a natural talent as a pianist. And so she studied from about the age of 3 on piano. And then at some point in her schooling, she just started singing. And so these were inborn talents, and she had a wonderful piano teacher, and she at 10 years old was planning to go into the Peabody Conservatory, but went back to East Durham where she was born, and continued high school. And she just knew how to create beautiful music, and she appreciated beautiful music, peaceful music, and but jazz, piano. And so she's your classic 50s jazz vocalist who never really grew up. And she's just a voice that's a wonderful part of the soundtrack of your life if you allow her to be. And so smart people do. And I love hearing, I run her social, and I talk to her family all the time. And I say, it's just amazing because it's the young people who are like, where was she all my life? And I'm like, you're 15, So it's interesting. It's very interesting. And we use the socials because she was so encouraging to me. She was encouraging but limited to others, but we try to use her socials to encourage others too. So it's kind of nice. It's full circle from the web to social media. It's been a nice transition. But as an artist, sorry, I'm getting lost here.
Sure, keep going.
But as an artist, she was a woman that had a lot of hard knocks in her life. Every time she got to a certain level, the door closed. And at one point, she ended up in England, which is the box set that just came out, was those years. And then at one point, the record deals dried up. And she was at a big label in New York, and she had the idea to record her own master. So she made her own album, packaged it on a tape, and she shopped it around. And the goal was to force a recording contract and to control it herself. And so very rare for a woman to do that, especially in the 60s and 70s. And at this label, they said to her, we will give you $2,500 and we'll probably release it. And she said, well, what about a deal? What about royalties? And they said, no, just, this is what we're offering. And certainly not anything that would maintain a career. And she, from what her friend told me, said, the hell with this, and picked up her tape and walked out of the office. She met that day the graphic designer that designed all her subsequent albums, and she formed her own label. And so she's probably the first woman in the world to have her own label, independent label, that is still 50 plus years later, still in existence. She had a lot of help, but it was a lot of work. Johnny Mercer, the great songwriter, named the label. If your name is Blossom, your label should be Daffodil. So Daffodil Records came into being, and she took that album that she had recorded in London that was worth only $2,500, and she released it as an LP. And it was a high quality LP, and it's very sought after to this day. We reissued it in 2017 with some bonus tracks, and we've discovered more bonus tracks. So the great thing that people should understand when you control your business and control your intellectual property is that you can continue recording beyond the length of an album. And so we find these great things in her vault. And so it's going to get another reissue. So, $2,500 or 50 years of a career later, she made the quintessential right choice.
And so Blossom also ran with all of her, and I will call them, because it's rightfully so, her fellow elites in the jazz world. How are there any names that you recall that she sang with, played with, had martinis with, to help people who aren't jazz fans go and say, oh, I at least know that name?
Right. So she was good friends with Miles Davis. They met. So Gil Evans had an apartment in New York City in the late 40s where all the jazz guys hung out, and Blossom. And so Miles Davis was amazed that she would yell at her audiences. So if she was singing, you weren't talking, and you weren't serving food, and you weren't drinking, you were paying attention. And so she would chastise her audiences, and she did that right until she died. So we would sit in horror in New York City as she would yell at people and slam the piano lid down and think, oh, this is the night when the brawl erupts. But so Miles Davis said, that's amazing. And apocryphally, we don't know if this is true, but he allegedly said she's the only white woman who ever had soul. And so that's sweet. But so he had her perform with him at the Village Vanguard in the 60s. Tony Bennett, if anyone recalls Tony Bennett's album, Spring in Manhattan, she found that song. Her friend wrote it, and she took it to Tony Bennett, and in 6 weeks he had a hit record. And so for the rest of her life, she said, if you have a great big record label behind you, look how fast you can get a hit record. And all I have is Little Daffodil. But it was okay because they were friends. I'm trying to think of who else. She was all over. I mean, Bill Clinton was a fan. Um, you know, she had a lot of pockets of, we used to call it Deary Mania, because you'd get like a Christina Aguilera as a fan. And so you'd find out third hand that Christina Aguilera was talking about Blossom at a dinner party, and you would tell her and she'd be like, oh, that's nice. And then meanwhile, everybody else is like, that's big. But, you know, she knew it fit into her goal and her mission, but it didn't derail. Nothing derailed her from being her.
That's wild. So, and you're such an expert being able to speak to, to helping us understand who she was, because you spent so much time with her and you're almost her biographer, with all of this information that you have. But now I've got to ask, like, you've said we a number of times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the context of our show here at Bootstrapped Unicorns, you have such an entrepreneurial surprise in your relationship. I mean, it started, you watch a cartoon, you love a voice, you do some research, you correct the misspelling, you've got a website, you've done all these really neat, unusual things that most kids would be like, I watched a cartoon, now I'm going to have a peanut butter sandwich and play basketball, but not you. So you've done all of that, which is already kind of remarkable for a human. But the fact that the superstar was like, I am going to talk to this kid is also a remarkable relationship moment. And I love it, but it didn't stop there. And that's what I think is so interesting to me, that a decision and an action you took at 15 has led you to something so much greater. And so tell me more about we.
So we is, I kind of refer to the multi strands of my life. So the we is, for her, it was, I always loved interacting with the fans. And so when I would disseminate this information that, so-and-so likes her, or, she's known by so-and-so, it was always to bring the fans along, because they were so supportive of her, and there was such a great relationship with the fans. But I say we too, because me as an industrious person, I've always, and like, not to get into the deep things of Jamie Smith, but, it's a multifaceted life, in that a lot of things are happening at once that are completely unrelated. Some are great, some are not so great, but the good things buoy past the bad things. And so I've always spoken like that. Clinically, it could be a very bad thing. I could be disassociative.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're schizophrenic. I've talked to you enough to know that I talked to the only Jamie. But but the we also in my mind, because I'm aware that you are integral in Daffodil and the furtherance of Blossom's influence as a musician now that she's passed. And I think there are stories that I think everybody culturally is aware of when a celebrity is passed. And let's say the Zappa family is an interesting example of a family that they could be, as a group, furthering Frank's music. But instead, there's infighting amongst the children. And I have worked with Dweezil Zappa ever so briefly. We did a documentary piece on him and spent some time with him one amazing evening. And he and I offline spoke a little bit about the drama around his family. And he said that it just kind of broke his heart, because his dad was a great musician and he's trying to bring his dad's music to a new generation. And so that's why he was touring the way he was touring. And he didn't really want to apologize for loving what his dad did. But he was hampered by family relationships that weren't working and kind of stomping on it. And I don't know that there's any Zappa fan on the planet that is doing what you're doing in your world on behalf of Daffodil and Blossom. And so I find this extremely unique and magical. So I just wonder if you can tell me, like, you've made it from fan to friend to some version of like business manager relationship. I don't know how to define it. I'm probably saying it wrong, but you have this.
It's not definable.
Thing.
It's ethereal. It's not definable at all. And I struggle with it. I can't I put it on a resume, but nobody gets it. And it's like when you search for things in life and you end up just finding yourself. This is one of those things. And so, but I will tell you, it was just a mission. It became a mission because she was so wonderful to me to further the music. And when she passed, it turned out that she had a wonderful, lovely niece and nephew, Wayne, Peggy and Wayne. And they put their arms around me when after my grandfather passed away before. I was raised by my grandparents, so he passed away before her. Then she passed away a couple months later. Then my brother died, my best friend died, my doctor died. I mean,
Oh
it's
my.
just so Wayne and Peggy kind of came into my life when it was just a minefield. And so and they're wonderful people, and they love their aunt, and they were part of their aunt's life, and they want to further the music, and they care. And that's the difference, I think, is the care. I was tearing up a little bit when you were talking about that, because they put their arms around me. It was very hard to lose my brother. It's hard to lose anybody, but
It is.
Just to tell me stories. They had a similar loss, and my grief was very private, and so they let it come out of me, and which began the healing. So
Yeah.
I'm forever grateful to them. And
So you've got these amazing people in your life as a result of more amazing people who came into your life, and it started with you being bold, and I love this. And now, what does day to day look like? And of course, I mean, you're the first person on Bootstrapped Unicorns who doesn't have an entrepreneurial venture in the traditional way. What you do is very entrepreneurial, and it's on behalf of Blossom and her music and her legacy.
Mm-hmm.
But you actually, your day to day technologically aligns actually with a lot of what you're doing for Blossom's legacy. But so during the day, you're Bruce Wayne, and at night you're Blossom Batman. Could you help us understand what life looks like today for you and what you're doing?
So I've worked in communications, in education for over 15 years. And then I've also concurrently had my own business too. So but I primarily
is that part.
Yeah. Well, it's just, we have our own business. But so I've always done, it ended up being social media content, but writing, and development work for a local community college. And then now I'm at the Rochester City School District, and have found at my age, which if you figure out the math from what I said before, how old I was and what year things were, you'll know how old I am. I've unexpectedly found my dream job and dream people. And so there's gratitude that's so immense that I can't express here. But that's, so my day to day is mostly social media communications work as part of a wonderful dynamic team. And our boss, our chief, has charged us with uplifting the stories and the profile of our school district, and we all play a part, and it's a wonderful experience. So,
well, and what you're doing there seems to fall in line with a similar, at least, sentiment and some of the technological skills you need for what you're doing for Blossom's, content. Tell me more about what you do now with Daffodil Records.
Okay. So with Daffodil now, so we have a back catalog, I think, of 9 albums that still need to be released. There were 13 or 14, depending on configurations. And so Blossom would change things up, and things would go in and out of print at her whim. So now, she also didn't take care of her tapes. So when you're forward thinking like she was, tapes are done, they're the past, and whatever. So we've spent the last couple of years digitizing and repairing things. And so a lot of that is we're working on probably the hit album was her second one, Blossom Dearie, 1975. And unfortunately, the tape is a mess. And so I think we're almost there. But we've worked with a couple different people to restore and digitize that for release. So Blossom will finally get her own vinyl release, and something high quality, and it'll come from Daffodil and not, another label. And we think that'll sell well. The Grammys aren't terribly favorable to Blossom, and awards haven't been, even though she's been in. We place her songs in TV shows, and I work with a gentleman that runs her publishing, and with the family, and so we have this great archive, and we just try to exploit it for the fans. Not, most people are deals and it's cash only. Our goal is to get as much of Blossom out there as possible. So newspaper clippings and scraps and photos, and she had a great photographer. I mean, this is a woman, independent label, and she had a personal photographer. And so, I used to talk to, like, when I worked at the college, younger people, and they would say, "How do you know you've made it?" And I would say, "You have a personal photographer." I mean, you could be any field, but if you have someone to take your picture, you've made it. So, but because she had that, we have a great wealth of resources that we can share with the fans and further the understanding of her music. So it's exciting. It's kind of neat. We're around the holidays, we get to about 1 million listeners on Spotify. So that's exciting. And we have new products coming out. We just had a big box set come out from in England, but it's worldwide. And so after Blossom passed away, we found tapes in her house, and they were little 5 and 7 inch reel tapes. And I took them and I just put them in a box and walked off. And her nephew had some too. And we discovered that there were tons of recordings that she made in the 60s that were owned by Universal Music. And so we did a deal with them. I did a deal, but we, Daffodil, and they reissued her 4 albums recorded in England, plus 27 unreleased tracks. And we have even more unreleased tracks that will probably come out at some point. And it's a great box set. I have it here with it's never far from me. I'm very proud of it.
Can you show it?
Sure. So this is the box set, and included in it.
She's absolutely classic.
And we didn't know this photo existed of her. So what the good people at Universal did is Big Mouth asked to write the liner notes, never having done this before. And so they said yes. And over the course of a year, they said, it could be between 1,500 and 10,000 words. And I thought, well, it will never be 10,000 words. And it turned out to be, I think, 16,000 words. So they turned my words into a book about Blossom. And so
that is outstanding.
We have, and the fans have, this wonderful book. And this is my favorite photo, because this is Blossom when she was preparing to go into the Peabody Conservatory to train so that she'd be eligible when the age time came. And so the fans now have a nice hardcover that tells Blossom's story without, there's a lot of, the internet, there's drama. People met her because Blossom was tough, and people tell tales. There's one guy that repeatedly tells a very mean story about her and an appearance in Washington, D.C. So we get questions about it all the time. And I say, if you enjoy it, believe it, but also get to know Blossom. This, I hope, does it. And then all the albums were remastered for streaming, and the Daffodil albums will follow this. More of the Daffodil albums will follow. And so she will have, and she, as she has had for 50 years, she'll have her albums in the marketplace. And so
outstanding. What's it like to be like, hey, I found all of these tapes and I think I'm going to go cut a deal with a record label. What is it like to call Universal and say, I think I have a thing?
Well, they called me and they thought they were just going to release the 4 albums. And I took a meeting with them and I told the family. And then at the end of the meeting, I said, I have a surprise for you. And I said, I have a stack of tapes, and I probably have a picture of it in here. All these tapes. This is really great. So we have, tons, stacks, so more than this page. And I said, and they belong to you, because Ronnie Scott, jazz people will know, he has a great club in England. He's passed away, and he recorded many artists. And I said, so his voice is on, so these are your tapes, and they had no record of them. So it was probably the worst business deal I've ever done for Blossom, because we could have just released them ourselves, but we didn't. So Universal took ownership of them, and I negotiated a raise in the royalty rate for the family for this release and for all other releases going forward. And they took it to Abbey Road. So we were ecstatic to hear that Abbey Road was going to have Blossom's tapes, and they will Simon Gibson restored them, and it was pretty neat to see, this little surprise become a big thing. And
what I really appreciate, I understand that you probably could have kept it close to your vest and released them just to release them and not told Universal. But
Mhm.
I love how jokingly I get that it's probably the worst negotiation tactic
Yeah.
ever to be like, I'm holding your stuff and you can have it.
Yeah.
But that level of transparency and honesty in modern business
Mhm.
is so fruitful. And look at you negotiating up the rate. I mean, how could they
Yeah.
not respect you for saying, hey, I've got something and it's going to make your effort better?
Mhm.
That
And
it's just so smart.
well, and the wonderful thing was that the young lady that was a big fan of Blossom, she was an intern. Her name is Chanel, and then she works for Chas Chandler over at Universal in the UK. They were fans and they cared and they loved Blossom, and so from that became a partnership. Chas, worked on the royalty rate and floated that, and we went back and forth, not back and forth to negotiate, but it was like, wow, that's exciting to tell the family. That's the back and forth, and so he made it happen, and I was just filling a seat. Um, so there's the transparency, because if you ask me a question, or I will tell the absolute truth. But so it was nice to form a partnership around these tapes, and to have people that love and care as much as I do. Um, and a great product was the child that was born out of this partnership. So, and that's this recording. And so,
So what's your favorite? Is the album played classic vinyl or streaming your jam? Which one?
so I like classic vinyl. If you look at the wavelengths of CD versus vinyl, I'm not sure about streaming. I'll have to look. The CD wavelengths are choppy and vinyl wavelengths are smooth. So you do have a better sound experience with a record. So, and it's nice to hold something in your hand. It's nice to, I
It
think when we
really is.
grow
There's
up,
something.
like all kids want their teddy bears or whatever, and I think adults want toys too, but we don't get to have them. And so I think the vinyl resurgence is adults get to have a toy, they get to hold something in their hand and treasure it. You know,
It feels a little bit like you've got a possession. As I listen to music streaming while I drive, and I listen to
Mhm.
podcasts while I drive. It's I don't listen to the radio. I listen to those two things,
Yeah,
and I don't really feel like I have either of them. I'm
right,
borrowing them in the moment. But
right,
and not that you ever have like the licensing rights. You can't play it in your movie or something, but
right.
you can pick it up and put it on and say, this is my copy
Hmm.
of this great work.
And then
And
if you,
so there's just something, I don't know, there is something big kid about having your album.
yeah. And if you do what we're trying to do with with Blossom's archives, is not everything's going to come out as an LP or CD, but some things will be streaming, and the ancillary things related to them, behind the scenes photos, sheet music, will end up online. But for the things that do get an LP release, they'll have photos and they'll have neat liner notes, and you'll hold something and get to have a little glimpse into Blossom's life at that time too.
Yeah. Do you ever, and I feel like this for me is always the case when I've got a good album on, it moves me back in time to the point that, to the era that it was created in. Like with Blossom's content, I could imagine making sure that I have incandescent lighting in the room, orange,
Yeah.
not bright white, and maybe a good glass of Merlot,
Right.
and just the right setting, because that seems to be the tone that it sets. But I think it
Hmm.
sets it more in vinyl.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's funny you say incandescent. The jazz pianist Marion McPartland wrote Blossom a letter towards the end of her life, and she said, "You are incandescent." And I thought that was such a great line. So I use the word incandescent all the time, and probably too much and inappropriately applying it to things. So that was a great word.
Oh well,
You are,
we'll
you
say
are
that it was
incandescent.
it was excellent. Yes, I would like to say I planned that, but maybe it was just one of those karmic cosmic moments.
Yeah.
Um, so the yeah, I'm trying to put a definition right now on I want a job title for you, but you don't have a job title. You're doing all of these things because I know you're still handling a lot of the social media presence.
All of it. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I thought so. Right.
Yeah.
How much time does that take you during the week?
Not long, because that's old hat for me. Like I know how to create content, so it's more the love. It's more the if I can pick an angle of a song, or pair it with something to touch someone's heart, that they'll want to listen to it or share it. Um, that takes a little bit of time, but it's hours laying in bed if you can't sleep, you create content. early
Okay, so
morning
you're
walk.
doing the social, and it's
Mhm.
second nature. You're
Yeah.
negotiating albums. You're writing the liner notes. What other things are happening right now, or even just you've experienced over the last couple of years that are part of the life that you've built around, Blossom and Daffodil?
Well, for Blossom, the big push is the albums, and that takes the work. That's because there's a lot of waiting and back and forth, and I'm very shy with the tapes. I don't like things out of the family's hands. So, things move very slowly, and the fans are probably annoyed by that, and I get that. But things have to be done right. And
Yeah.
the gift that Blossom and Daffodil have given me is that I have an interesting life, and I always like to, every day is a day to learn and do something new, and I do that. I have a friend that has an injury, and she was going to lose her job. So secretly, for the past couple months, I've been filling in for her, and no one knows, and so she gets to keep her job, and I get to be unknown forever. But you know, it. I just I don't know. I think knowing Blossom gave me the ability to say, you know, life isn't always going to be great, but you can do what you want with it. And so I know people say, well, I don't have the resources and I don't have whatever, but you know, stop being a seeker and be a doer, and the resources will come. Um, Everybody gets caught up in philosophies and quotes, and um, I'm caught up looking at myself here because I think this is a terrible angle. So we'll have to redo the whole podcast. But
You're
you
fine.
know,
You're fine. You're good.
but this is a great moment in time. This is a really great moment because it's two humans connecting, and I'm enjoying myself. Hopefully you're enjoying yourself, and I get to
I,
tell, the great, like, I think in life, everybody now I'm getting really philosophical, but like everybody thinks that great love stories are romantic. But I think in my life, I've had wonderful love stories that weren't romantic, that were friends and family,
yeah.
and a limited family, but still, so the story that was, I was the first grandchild born I live in the house that I was raised in, and I was the first grandchild on the street. So when I was born at the hospital, my grandparents were there, and they were joking. It took so long for me to be born that one of them would have to go to the bathroom, and the joke was, when whoever has to go to the bathroom first comes back, I'll have been born, because they'd waited so long. And sure enough, my grandmother left, and when she came back, I had been born. Um, and so, but think of the love that awaited me, and then to come home, and I just before my grandmother died, I found all the cards from my birth from the whole neighborhood. And so all this stuff I knew about myself that has kept me doing what I do is because I remember that, people were expecting me, and almost fought over me, to be. And so I don't take that as a discount. I really, I've had inspiring things happen to me and keep me going, and not been
Yeah,
a
there's a
terribly happy
certain
life.
richness. I mean,
Hmm.
disconnecting love from romantic reminds me a lot of. I've heard a lot of sermons about the the definitions of love from the Greek language of agape, eros, and phileo, and
Right.
agape being a godly love, and
Mm.
frequently connected to the love a father would have for a child. And
Right.
then Eros being the classic, all right, romantic love. But
Yep.
then Phileo, city of brotherly love, Philadelphia,
Right.
is, Phileo love. And I think there's a richness of life and humanity that people
Yeah.
don't own enough of, especially in modern times, that is one of the reasons why we even exist. And
Right.
so it seems like you put a lot of emphasis even in your entrepreneurial pursuits on behalf of Blossom, and and the fans. You keep bringing up the fans. It
Yeah.
seems like it's more for them than anything right now,
Mm.
and there's a certain care and love that you're putting in, that it's that phileo love.
Right. And to love yourself. And so we get letters, emails, and DMs from people, and I look at their content, and it's like, my goodness, you're 15 years old, you're 17 years old, you're in college, and you're going to record shops to find Blossom Dearie albums. And I think, that's love. So the least I can do, and we get
Yeah,
uh, messages from people all the time that want to be pianists or singers, or they want to do something creative with their life. And I always respond encouragingly. And it's not, I don't get, you can go listen to Blossom and we get a half a penny per stream, or you can buy a CD or whatever. But it's more because I think that Blossom's life counted for something. She made my life count for something, and I had better pay it forward.
What are kids getting out of this? I mean, in a world where, we've got Taylor Swift blowing everything up in good ways. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but she's a very different style of music than Blossom's music. And, Blossom is so polar opposite from anything you would call in like the hip hop world. She's a renaissance of music in comparison. What are you hearing from the younger fans? What's drawing them?
I think there's a purity, and I think there's a simplicity. I think that Blossom wanted to record and to do things that were beautiful and to make spaces beautiful. And I think so instead of just cutting albums, some artists put out 3 albums a year and it's just, song after song after song. But for Blossom, things were crafted well, and it resonates with people. I think that her music has an acoustical space around it that young people don't hear. So there's no pulsating melodies, or nothing is drowned out. It's economical, it's purposeful, and it's beautiful. And I think in a harsh world, people need Blossom still. And I think there's a resonance of good and beauty and enjoyable and peaceful music that people take to. And it's funny because Blossom, one of her friends in New York City, told me that she used to hang out at hip hop clubs after her shows on Saturday nights. So at 2 a.m, this 80-year-old woman was going to clubs, and I always wanted to know these people. And the other day, somebody wrote me and he said, I miss Blossom. She used to come to, I forget the name of the club, on Saturday nights. And I said, oh, wow, I have finally found the people I wanted to talk to for 20 years. And so now we're connected. And these wonderful stories of Blossom going to hip hop clubs and teaching people chords and say, oh, no, play it like this. But I love your music and I love what you're doing. And wow, that's neat. How did you come up with that? So this woman who was a natural talent, a genius, encouraging people that were completely out of her genre. And that's the other story too, is, why do you have to stay here? And why do you have to be cool? And why do you, if you're yourself and you push forward and you do things and you don't pose and you don't talk, you get that cred and that coolness that I think everybody wants. I think Blossom is eternally cool, and people get that because she didn't put up with any shit at all, ever. And theoretically, that could have turned out to be a very bad thing. She could have.
Look at Miranda Lambert just recently was yelling at people from stage, and social media was chastising her for somebody taking a selfie in front of the stage. Yet those are the people who kind of pay her bills, and I get the reason why the audience is kind of upset about it. And fascinatingly enough, Blossom was telling people to stop, chewing loudly in the audience.
Right. We had, and this is my favorite story, we had a woman in an audience in New York City, and this is the early days of cell phones, so like a Nokia phone with a terrible ringtone, and it was the Lone Ranger theme song. So we were listening to this cheap Lone Ranger going on and on and on. And Blossom's bass player said, please turn that off. He was speaking to the audience. Blossom hadn't heard it yet. He picked out the tune on his bass and he said, whoever phone is doing this, turn it off. And all of a sudden, the piano lid slammed down and Blossom said, I don't have to put up with this. Get out. And I thought, she knew the line because, you don't want to treat your fans badly, but we were all like, get this lady out of here. And, it took guts, 78 years old to do that. And so, like I said, theoretically, it could have been a bad decision. People can do whatever they want. They can go off on you. They can be violent. But, I think people realize she took great risks and with great power and great strength, she survived and she thrived. And I think people see that in themselves. And I think you don't have to have a
very
huge
instructive for all of us.
Yeah. You don't have to have a huge record label behind you. You don't have to have, a machine or money. You can still create. You can still be very successful and very happy and very well, and not have to pay any dues to people that are just will take from you. Pay dues to your future self. Don't pay dues to somebody who's going to get a percentage of your future self. So
Yeah,
I've
that's
always thought,
unreal. Can I ask a very probing question you don't have to answer, but
sure.
you're putting so much effort into Blossom's world,
Mhm.
and is this a decision you made where you're going to be the unpaid intern to do this because you love it? Have you found a way to be on payroll? Are you a part owner? Like what because it's such it sounds like an all-consuming thing. I know you do a lot of other stuff, but you
Yeah,
put a
no,
lot
and
of time and effort in. what's
yeah,
what's that
and
look like?
it's not a terrible amount of time, and it's wonderful time. It's good time. So I
Oh,
am,
I know. Oh, I don't
yeah,
question for a second that
no,
you
I know,
love it. You can see it
yeah,
all over you.
no, I know. But I get a percentage of some of the daffodil sales, and I just a
Okay.
small, and um, but I love this family so much. They're good people, and I'm not saying like entrepreneurial, don't take a paycheck, but so I send in my commission request every couple of years or so. I don't track it at all like that. I I'm
Well,
just so
that's
grateful.
and yet again, I have to step back and be in awe. When you and I first talked, and you're like, "Yeah, I was a kid, watched a cartoon, became friends with like just the whole trajectory." I hope you also find it kind of remarkable that at this point in your life, you took a moment of fandom and turned it into being a minority stakeholder in a record label for the person you found amazing as a 15-year-old. Like,
Yeah.
come on, that's cool.
Well, and so I wouldn't say stakeholder because I'm very separate from I'm not in ownership or management or anything. But
Okay,
I'm
you have
I'm
a
I'm
commission opportunity
yeah.
that you
And
have
but
turned it into something there.
I get to be the archivist and tell the story that meant so much to me to other people,
Unreal.
and you know and to Blossom's family. Like Blossom has her niece has a granddaughter who has musical talent, and there's some musical talent throughout the family, and it's like could that be the next. So I love hearing those stories. She said, I was listening in her room and she knew all the words to a song, and
Have
it's exciting.
you attempted to record the young voice singing those songs yet? Have you heard her doing it?
I've not heard her, no, but maybe that's actually a good idea. I didn't think I
Oh,
should
the
talk to
social
her.
content alone to experience
Yeah,
a family member singing. Is her last name also Deary?
no, no.
Okay,
Um, so yeah, Deary is kind of died. All Blossom's brothers have now passed. So,
got
and
it.
then through
Okay,
marriages and things, there's a kind of a
but
scattering of
a connected
the
family member who is
blood.
young.
Yeah,
How old is this young lady? Do we know?
I'm not sure. I'll have to find out. But
I think now's the time. I think today you
yeah,
make that phone call and say, what a fun thing to just put the voices against each other. And that
yeah,
would be so just that legacy connection and that family connection.
yeah.
What a Christmas gift to the fans to
Oh, that'd be neat.
experience that this year.
I didn't think of that. Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be
Yeah,
neat.
now I'm going into consulting mode and I'm okay
Yeah,
with it. I totally would be
yeah,
just because it gives you the chills, doesn't it? That a family
yeah.
member's carrying on some of the songs.
And that a young person cares. There's a
Yeah,
certain level of intellect too that is thrilling to me. So
I fully
yeah,
agree.
but I think if you look at me, like I don't have a title, or I just am. But at least if I was in the music business, if I was really in the music business, um, the the proper way, I wouldn't be where I am. I would be sitting on the other end of a phone call, waiting to hear if Mariah Carey's Christmas dress fits this year or not, and how to spin that into you know like yeah, it's the spirit of giving, um, and how do you promote that? And so now I don't have to do you know because of Blossom, I've never had to do things like that. I've gotten to just be me, and I've applied her
So
life lessons.
yeah, and you're right too, because you would all in all likelihood you wouldn't be that 1% or less story where you're the record executive flying on the private jet. Most of
Right.
we people end up as hopefully a happy cog in a system, but a cog in the
Mhm.
system nonetheless.
Right.
And for you to have landed in this position, it's and honestly, when you brought the story to me of what you've managed to accomplish with this relationship, it it had to be on this show because what I take is so much inspiration from you is
Mhm.
you were just like, I'm just gonna do it. Your
Yeah.
I'm just gonna do it thing is so refreshing in a world of people who overthink and go, oh, she's never going to read it. She's never going to respond. Oh, I can't set that up. I might be stepping on intellectual property. Like they have all the reasons to not do it. And you were like, yeah, there's kind of all the reasons to do it.
Right. Right. And it was a great decision. It was, for my own personal enjoyment and for, we just came out of Grammy season. And so I got to say that I was I was not nominated. So thank you to the Academy. But I was in.
Now, can you explain that to me? Because I was sitting there reading the Grammys nominations that morning, hoping to see your name on there. I put it on my calendar just to check in, and like I told you in a text message or a call at another point, what you've accomplished has no connection to whether the Grammys agree with what you've accomplished or not. It is incredible, but. That said, I don't understand, like, had you submitted to the Grammys for an opportunity? How did they become aware of the album in the first place?
So Universal Music submitted, and I thought that is great. Universal's huge. I think we were competing with stateside artists too, so I think there was probably, not a great enthusiasm in some parts of Universal and a wonderful enthusiasm in other parts. So we were up for Best Historical Album, box set presentation, and liner notes, so the book that I wrote. And so I joked because I turned on the live stream and my category was announced by Weird Al, and I said, oh no, this is not a good harbinger. So and I clicked through and fast forwarded as it would allow me, and I just knew. It's funny because I knew that morning I knew I was not going to be a Grammy nominee, and it was fine. I mean, I went do what I always do. I went into the kitchen and I set the timer to 4 minutes and, get it out. And when the bell dings, you go on with your life. And I did. I had a very busy day ahead of me. I think I was off from work too. So I was off to my own devices that day, but I had friends in and out and, but so I'm a Grammy Award loser, but in life, I'm a winner. That's how I look at it.
I could not agree more. And being in this industry the way we are here at C47, it's an industry that is very awards driven. So I've entered no less than 200 times and been a part of some great wins. But what I've learned is that it's a little bit less the odds of the lotto, but at the same time, it's more in how many times you play, not in whether you're really good at it or not. I mean, you win some, you lose some. And so I've started not taking as much stock in that. And I think you're in a very oddly wonderful position that with you having access to the fan base, you get to judge whether your work is received well. And that is more telling than a group of nomination adjudicators in some private room drinking whiskey making decisions. It's and I can say the same for the Oscars too. I've got friends who are Oscar judges, and it came to my attention that there's about 6,000 of them, and most of them, like 95% of them or something like that, are old white men.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, it doesn't really help me when I'm trying to make something that's appealing to a completely different demographic than you.
Right. Right. And so that's why you can't let things get in. And I have this imaginary umbrella, and it's feathers, because what happens to a duck? The water rolls off the feathers. And so I've always had this imagery. I learned from someone else. I can't remember who told me that, but I like the image because everything just rolls off. I hear what people say about, I hear what people think. We're all humans, and we people like us, people don't like us, and they're happy to tell you. And so, but nothing gets through, and the winds don't get through too far either, because let's keep going, and let's not be cocky.
Well, and I like your 4-minute tactic. That's one that I'm gonna teach my kids.
Four.
Yeah, because my kids are in middle school and high school. My youngest isn't yet; he's in kindergarten, and I think the biggest arguments that happen there are whether the Matchbox car in the dirt really was or wasn't, one of the kids, and those are easily resolved. But the middle school and the high school drama, I like the 4-minute rule. That as a parent, that's great, but really also as an entrepreneur, we don't really have the luxury of stewing if we're serious about what we're doing.
Right. Because, the algorithm awaits. You have to post content and you have to do it at a prescribed time, but there's this giant eye in the sky, so you're sacrificing your creative work to gods you don't know, and
Yeah,
they're
are you
demanding gods.
accusing Mark Zuckerberg of being Saruman? I think you might be.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
I have very little faith in any system. I have great faith in great people and creative people and kind people. And so I think, but all those people are entrepreneurs. You find them everywhere, and you have to move on. You have to do what you have to do. You have to meet your payroll, and at some point you have to fulfill yourself. So,
yeah,
that's the biggest thing is, are you going to sit and wallow? So the 4 and 5 minutes, the 5 minutes I feel is like you're saying, I've given up part of my life. 4 minutes is I'm saying I'm choosing to give up a certain part of my life and then move on. It's
yeah.
I worked at
Jamie, you gave me access to music for this episode, and we're going to play some of those songs through the episode. And Miller, who is a musician, he's on our staff, he's going to take the lead on editing this episode to get those tracks in. But I was wondering if our audience is curious about Blossom, and boy, they should be at this point.
Yeah.
One, what is your favorite album of hers that is available to somebody who might have an iTunes subscription or a Spotify stream, something where they can go and just experience her work now?
Yeah. So my favorite is My New Celebrity Is You. I used to lay on my bedroom floor when I was 14, 15, 16 and listen. It was a double LP and I had the LPs and I would listen to them over and over and over again. And one of the songs I chose was You'll Never Lose the Love You Give to Me. And there's a great line in that song. Through the winding turns of an autumn day, I lost the fight and found my way. You were the one who showed me where to be. You'll never lose the love you give to me. And I think if anything sums up my life, there it is. And it's a beautiful song. And so I chose that. So that's a great place to start. Blossom Dearie Sings, her first self-produced album on Daffodil, is great. It's funky and it's got great bass and people love it. And she wrote all the songs on that. And she wrote You'll Never Lose the Love You Gave to Me as well. And then the third song I sent is from the forthcoming Volume 2 on Daffodil, Blossom Dearie 1975. So that'll be we're trying to get it out by Valentine's Day because, love sells in many markets. And that is a song called Many's the Time. And it's just a very beautiful song. About two people being in each other's lives. And so then another line from that is she sings, like a girl in a dream with her arms open wide. Here I am, there you are, many's the time. And so I look at that, there have been so many great people, new people in my life and over the last year, and people have been in my life over the past, however many years I've been here. And, here I am, there you are, many's the time. And I think we need connections and we need people and we need love and we need good things, and I think Blossom represents all of that. So, but I think somebody new. The third song is Somebody New from Blossom Dearie Sings. That's what I meant to say, and that's her most popular streamed song on Spotify.
Cool.
That and Sunday Afternoon, which I didn't send, but Nora Jones and Remy just covered Sunday Afternoon. So it was nice to hear them in the studio, kind of just playing around with a Blossom song that she wrote, and trying to replicate her vocals and playing great piano, great vocals, great piano that Nora Jones and Remy did. That was kind of, wow, what a great honor for Blossom. So
100%.
Those are the big three.
How do we spend time digging through more about Blossom, learning more? I know we've got social, we've got a website. Where's our audience going to spend time doing that?
So the box set has the biography, and hopefully at some point that'll come out as a standalone book or something. Instagram, the Blossom Dearie. We would love, everybody wants followers. So I can pretend that I'm popular in some domains of my life. And if we've posted mostly stuff just for people to enjoy right now. We're starting to do more longer form writing and content. So that would be a great place. The Facebook page is good, but we have more followers on Facebook, but we have more activity on Instagram.
It's fascinating how social media works, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of neat. because you never know where you're going to jump, and then something will hit and you'll get 400 likes, and for Blossom that's huge. For GE it's nothing, but
right.
But relatively speaking, it's great, and so we just keep putting stuff out and seeing what people like, and it's nice that people ask questions, and I see a lot of fans now take ownership, like the older fans take ownership, like no, Blossom did this or Blossom did that, and so I think that's where I want people to be, to feel like they're a part of it. So,
and I think they do. I think they do feel a part of it. So, Jamie, again, this has been a fun conversation. It's the only conversation where we've gone really geeky on music, because you were honestly, you're one of two musical entrepreneurs we've had on the show, and one of them used to be a blue man, and now he sells real estate. So we're talking about the odd transition, being a musician who was successful to a realtor who was successful. And so we had that one story. Now we have yours, and I'm thrilled that we can share these music samples. So thank you so much for arranging that.
And I thank you for sharing them. And I'm already thinking, you've spurred me. What will my next career be like? So maybe I'll be an in-demand public speaker, or I'll tell this story, keep telling the story.
I'll be honest, as I'm closing this out, I just cannot tell you how inspired I am about how one youthful decision of interest and fascination and appreciation turned into a lifestyle and a lifetime of activity. People just don't know when they plant a seed, if they're genuine about it, what type of tree can grow. And your one seed to tree story that I know it's different and unique for an entrepreneurial show like this, but I think it's incredibly instructive that you've got to believe. And some of it is almost, don't worry about the believing as much as the doing, because so much doing is left on the table. It's not actually done. It's just left as an idea. And you're like, yeah, my idea, I'm doing. And that is instructive, my friend.
May I share one more thing?
Please. Go.
So when I was little, I've always written. When I was little in first grade, I used to write books on my lunch hours. And so everybody thought that was adorable. And then here I am. But I remember the story of Johnny Appleseed. And to a kid, you think he just walked around putting seeds down and planting trees. And now that's why we have trees. And so I think entrepreneurially, that story stuck with me. And I think it should resonate with others, because you just go planting. You don't know what's going to grow, but whether it's a furtherance of your current business or new venture or something personal or a dream, you just have to keep going and keep planting. And I think you're right. The story, the seed to story, it's like, wow, who knew? Yeah.
So, Jamie, thank you so much for being on the show. I am thoroughly inspired. I will be listening to Blossom all Christmas season this season. I have my waves of musical listening, and I'll be listening for sure to Blossom through this whole season. And I wish you a Merry Christmas. It's topical right now because we are recording during the holiday season. And thank you so much. And we will be tracking Blossom's blossoming through the internet, and you now have fans in us here at Bootstrapped Unicorns and C47 Films. I hope
you have a wonderful day, and we are going
to instruct all of our friends in social right now. Go to Instagram and be one of the people engaging with Blossom Dearie right now. I think you'll enjoy it.
We will talk, because you'll hear from me. If you interact, I'll interact back.